Are you struggling to come up with original content week in and week out? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients, let them talk about what they care about most, and never run out of content ideas again. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm James Carberry.
And I'm Jonathan Green.
Let's get into the show. Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. We are here today with Reid Carr. He is the president and CEO at Red Door Interactive. Reid, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
I'm stoked to chat with you today, Reid. We're going to be talking about this idea of aiming small to get big, and really how focus creates growth. And you guys have done an exceptional job of this. But before we get into the story and kind of the 16 years of growth that you've experienced at Red Door, I would love for our listeners to just understand a bit of context as, what is Red Door Interactive? What are you and your team up to over there?
Absolutely. Yeah. So at a high level, we're an advertising agency. I mean, we help brands make their mark and connect to their consumers through the various channels that they have at their disposal. So trying to tell effective stories, make sure they're informed by good decision-making and data, and then connecting the brand meaningful ways to consumers that are going to care a lot about them.
I love it. And so as we were talking about this idea, Reid, offline, I was really fascinated by what you were saying and how you have deployed this idea of aiming small to get big over the course of the 16 years of you running your agency. Can you walk us back to 16 years ago? You're starting baby business, and take us back to that moment and walk us through kind of the stages of as you're figuring out that, man, the smaller I aim, the bigger results I get, and we'll kind of start there and go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's fun to think back to those early days, because you have a lot of decisions you have to make. And one of the ones that's always pressing on your mind is, how am I going to get more business and how am I going to kind of keep this thing going? Because it was a big risk starting it in the first place.
Yep.
So, one of the bigger risks we can take is certainly saying, look, there's a lot of things we shouldn't be doing because it feels like you should be doing absolutely everything to bring revenue in the door. And I think that's a lot of times, one of the first mistakes that even established brands, not just the mini brands, make is they say, man, I need to appeal to more people or more things so that I can get more business or get any kind of leads whatsoever. And it takes a lot of discipline and probably a little bit of heartburn to say, you know what? No, there are things that I am going to be really good at, and I'm not going to accept everything. And when I say accept, and when we first start, it's not that people are beating down your door necessarily. Yeah. So it's not that you're having to refuse so many things, but what are you really going to pursue? And you don't necessarily know day one that what's going to be perfect at the time.
So what was the first thing with you, Reid? What was the first kind of moment in the life of the business where you said, nope, we're not going to take this opportunity because we're focusing here?
Yeah, I mean, so what we were starting to understand is what was going to be so critical in marketers' worlds at the time, which was obviously the transformation and movement toward digital. So thankfully, I think we were at the right era in time where it really didn't take a ton of experience to have a lot of relative experience in that space. So, but really that was our focus, was helping people understand what we felt was their internet presence. So getting them thinking a little bit bigger about where they were existing online and how they were showing up for consumers that were starting to show up there in droves. So what was really important to us, and the funny thing is the irony of the World Wide Web, in the sense that you could reach anyone anywhere and then conceptually do work for anyone anywhere. Our first key strategy was really focused on our own backyard, which, some of the early advisors and people who feel like, oh man, you're just starting up, you need to do business with anyone, anyhow, however business can be done. Our focus was really in our own backyard. So I felt like we had to earn it for the people who are closest to us. And the fact is, as anyone knows in marketing, some of this is about repetition. So how do you stay in front of enough people a handful of times when you're only a few people at the time? There was only 4 of us starting things out. So it was, local events and actually meeting people face to face, but focusing on the right kinds of businesses that were going to need the kinds of services and work that we were doing. And then in particular with service-based businesses like ours, like in advertising or many others, a lot of those key clients were saying, hey, what's work that, for someone who looks, what's work you've done for someone who looks exactly like me? So building a portfolio of work in particular categories was pretty critical. Also, that's the next one could come in the door and say, okay, yeah, I've seen you've done something for somebody who looks like me. So we had to really start understanding where we wanted to go and what were good kinds of clients that were going to be scalable into the next client that we wanted to work with.
Got it.
And again, doing it in our own backyard, despite being available to anyone in the world, was really what our first strategy was.
Got it. You guys decided to focus locally there in San Diego, meeting people at events, maybe even doing your own events.
Yep.
What then kind of the next evolution in the story of kind of aiming small to get big? You saw, you tasted the results as you started to focus in on San Diego. What came next?
Yeah. So then you start to, as we start doing work for a handful of more companies, you start to recognize what ones were having greater success with the kinds of work that we were doing. So tactically, in terms of building sites and doing SEO and doing some of the other tactics that we had at our disposal, who was getting the greatest benefit from what we were doing, and really start kind of paring that down by industry, by size, by a handful of criteria that really started to conceptually limit the world. So even then, cutting it another way, which is saying, okay, here are the businesses that are available to us in San Diego, of which there are still many, many businesses. But then cutting that even further and saying, you know what, we were having a lot of success with, at the time early on with some of these venture-backed companies who were having to scale in certain kind of new domains and compete with bigger companies who were maybe lagging behind. So we started kind of defining what the criteria was that worked really well for us, and we're getting the most benefit, because then the more benefit that they get from us, the more just the happier they are with us, and more likely they were then to refer us to other people or be a great reference for us if we referred other people to them to check us out. So very quickly we limited our world. Kind of fast forward even further when we started saying, okay, another level of clients that we're working really well with, we limited our world to about 40 different companies. In all of San Diego, we said, these are 40 companies that we think are a good fit for us.
Got it. But the work that you were doing for those 40 companies was making you really attractive to other companies that looked exactly like those 40 companies.
Well, exactly. So yeah, the handful of companies at that point that we were working with, and then what these other 40 might be a good fit for us. But the profound benefit of that, of having 40 companies to pursue, think about this, in your own, anybody's world right now in terms of their relationships. If somebody walks up to you and says, hey, do you know anybody who needs marketing services? You might be, I might think about it. I don't know who, do I know people in marketing? And you put a lot on the person you're asking.
Yeah.
Compared to if I walk up to you and say, hey, you know anyone at this company? You say, oh, I do. I know Joe. Whether or not they're in marketing or anything like that, say, hey, would you be willing? We've had a good experience with you. Would you be willing to just connect me with that person so I can kind of get to know them a little bit?
Yeah.
But it gave us a ton of runway on that, because we weren't trying to boil the ocean. We weren't having to hire all sorts of salespeople to pound the pavement in every corner of the country. I mean, it was starting to build these personal relationships with people, and then we could get the reps in front of these people that built trust. You were at events where they were at. You were hosting events that were built around their needs, because it's pretty easy once you start to really focus on an industry or a type of client to go, oh, these are the things they're dealing with right now. So I can craft an event just for one or two companies, despite having 50 people show up for it. Really, at the end of the day, it was just for the sake of these two companies that we're really trying to court right now. And if I get one of them, we're great.
Yeah.
The whole thing paid off.
I love that. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Sangram Vajra from Terminus, but a few years ago, he started this movement called Flip My Funnel. And it sounds really similar to what you're talking about. It's just this idea that, we can do things, we can create content to try to attract the masses. But the reality is they're only, a very small percentage of those people that we attract will be the type of people that we're wanting to work for. So instead, if you flip the funnel and you say, hey, I'm going to go out and I'm going to find these 40 target accounts or these 40 companies in San Diego that I know we could just crush it for, and then we're going to hand-to-hand combat each one of these 40. You can start to get real creative with how you engage each one of those 40 companies, like what you guys did and proved to be successful with. So I love this idea. There's just so much more targeted focus on the exact client that you know that you can get results for, as opposed to spending all this effort trying to attract people that, you know, aren't really your ideal fit.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And I think what I always tell people is like, you know, their concerns like, wow, well, what if none of them want to buy right now or something like that? It's like, look, at the end of the day, with all that focus, and if you have a certain track record and history, you're going to get collateral damage too. If you're aiming at the bullseye, you know, there's still some people out there you didn't know existed who are still a good fit that might reach out, or you might, because you're starting to build a network and starting to build a reputation within a category. So it's not like that all of a sudden there's just this other world is no longer available to you either, but that's just not where your focus is. And sometimes you just get a happy accident.
Yep. No, I love it. I love it. Reid, is there any other, before we, I'm going to start asking, this is the first episode where I'm going to start asking a question at the end of each interview. But before I get to that question, is there anything else around this idea of aiming small to get big that you think listeners should walk away with before we close out the interview?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the thing that you know, I want people to understand is it is so easy. It's the knee-jerk reaction is to kind of say, hey, I need to make myself available to more people. And avoiding that knee-jerk reaction is probably one of the hardest things that certainly leadership has to do. But once they start to kind of get themselves immersed in the world of their ideal customer, it's just amazing how quickly the world actually opens up even further. And so, you know, as we're not just local anymore, and we've gone national as well. It's because we've earned that right, and we continue to refine in greater detail a smaller focus on a type of customer that works really well, of which there are still thousands out there. So it's not like you know, the world just gets a lot smaller faster in a very useful way, but it still is a pretty darn big world. So I'm not trying to say that people are going to get limiting themselves. I think it's a way to grow big.
No. So Reid, the last question that I'm going to ask, that I'm going to start asking in each of these interviews is what would you say is the legacy that you want to leave behind?
So, you know, one of the biggest things for us at Red Door is the idea of celebrating the individual on a lot of different levels. And so the legacy that hopefully we're doing here within our company, but then outside of our company philanthropically and beyond, is really helping people pursue their dreams, understand who they are as an individual and what's going to make them happy in the work that they do that occupies so much of their life on a day-to-day basis. So philanthropically, we support reading programs because we believe that, and certainly those reading programs that are under third grade, as they say, kids who they learn to read up till third grade and then they read to learn third grade and beyond.
Yep.
And when you're able to read, your world opens up and then you can explore things that are meaningful to you. So, you know, we take that as a philanthropic platform, but we bring that kind of thing here internally as well at the company and making sure that people really do find their passions. We operate from a place of strength. If you've ever been exposed to Strength Finder.
Yep.
And a lot of different mechanisms that say, let's identify who we each are as individuals, bring ourselves together to collaborate and respect one another. But at the end of the day, it's celebrate these individuals and allow people to live the life they want to live. So hopefully in some way, I'm supporting that and facilitating that and building a philosophy here that will endure well past my lifetime.
I love it. Reid, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate your time today. If there's somebody listening to this and they want to stay connected with you or they want to learn more about Red Door, what's the best way for them to go about doing that?
Absolutely. So for Red Door, our website is reddoor.biz. So reddoor.biz. They want to follow me on Twitter, iCowboy. There's a whole story that goes along with that, but that's a place you can find me on Twitter. And certainly anyone ever wants to just send me an email, I'm at rcarr@reddoor.biz, rcarr@reddoor.biz. So happy to connect with anyone that way as well.
Awesome, Reid. Well, I'm not going to let you go before you explain the iCowboy handle. So explain that real quick.
Yeah. So I hopped on Twitter pretty much, right as it surfaced. And it was kind of this era it's all in context of that day that you're popping on there, what's top of mind. And we're having a conversation about the web being the wild, wild west. And, we're at the forefront and you're hired gun to kind of help people through it. So this whole internet cowboy thing was like a topic of the day that ultimately was like, yeah, iCowboy. And we thought it was cute. Didn't realize Twitter was really going to be as big as it ultimately was. Yep. And so we just sort of, went with it. So I grabbed my actual name at Reid Carr, but I don't put anything there. I don't know. I still have a passion for the iCowboy thing and this perpetual reminder of these things, this moments in time that, it's just, you never know when it's going to turn into the big thing that it is. So yeah. I feel like it's emblematic of that in some way.
I love it. No, I love that story. Thanks for sharing, Reid. All right, well,
yeah, you got
connect with Reid on Twitter, iCowboy. Shoot him an email. Check out their website, reddoor.biz. And Reid, man, thank you so much for your time. If you're a B2B marketer, we want to feature you on sites like the Huffington Post, Social Media Examiner, and Chief Marketer. Every week, we send out a question related to B2B marketing. We use the responses to those questions to fuel the content we write for really popular websites. So head over to sweetfishmedia.com/questions and sign up today.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.